Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Nyama, Wurundjeri Wurrung Gulin, Gungenyanu Bik Wenop Darabandari, Nyarayana Nyanga Bik Ban Ba Nyagu, Gagukal Nangit Bambu Thielingbu Ba Gamaji. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people on whose land Darebin Council stands. I recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We have a bit of an echo happening on the mic there. It might make it very difficult for people down the back to understand, and also may not come through very clearly for those who are viewing at home. So we might see if we can work out how to get rid of that echo. Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure that we get the echo sorted out because I'm quite concerned. And I had some feedback from members of the gallery last week about the quality of sound. Can I just get from some nods of head whether people can hear me down the back? That's great. Thank you. We have a busy agenda tonight. And I'll start, therefore, with apologies, noting that we have an apology from Councillor Tim Lawrence. I'll ask everyone if there are any conflicts of interest to declare this evening. Mr Hewitt.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, I have an indirect conflict of interest with item 7.6, minor building works contracts. I'm related to one of the owners of one of the building companies that tendered for the works.
Thank you, Mr Hewitt. If I don't remember, please raise your hand again when we get to that item.
Excuse me, Mayor. I'm having difficulty hearing. It's really... I'm not sure what's happening, but unless it's me or...
No, I'll try and speak like that. Is that better? I just don't want too much of an echo. Thank you, Councillor Greco, and please do be sure to let us know if any of this sound isn't coming through clearly enough. The next item on the agenda is confirmation of the minutes of the previous council meeting. That's moved by Councillor Lassurf and seconded by Councillor Messina. All those in favour? That motion is carried. That brings us to question and submission time. Just give me a moment, I'll make sure I've got the questions. So we have a number of questions that were submitted online prior to the meeting and some people here to ask those questions, and there will be an opportunity for other questions to be asked. So the first question is from Mr Jeff Richard. Mr Richards is not here, so I will read that question. Mr Richards has asked, whilst supporting the council rationale in the draft budget to apply the current maximum permitted rate increase, given the present virus affecting circumstances, does council still support a budget surplus, or has that now been reduced to an acceptable break-even budget following a council resolution on the same at its meeting at its May the 13th, 2020 special council meeting? Will the draft budget before further release now be revised in view of that resolution? Thank you for the question, Mr Richards. Council at its special council meeting last Wednesday resolved to advertise its draft 2020-2021 budget and seek comments and submissions which will be considered at a hearing of submissions committee on the 25th of June 2020. Council will then, on the 15th of July 2020, adopt the 2020-21 budget with or without changes. Until this time, Council's position on surpluses or anything else in relation to the budget will not have been finalised. The next question has been asked by Mr John Berryman. Mr Berryman, would you like to come up to ask your question? Mr Berryman, you have two questions. The second is very lengthy. I would ask, in accordance with our governance local law, on that second long question, if you could actually, I've read the whole question, thank you, but for the purposes of this, if you could just ask the question that it's the end of that. for the second
Expected that would be the case. Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. I'll ask a question tonight.
Can you speak louder, please? Yeah. Great.
Sure, I certainly can. My first question is, if the Strathallan Golf Club should fail due to the extreme revenue loss as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, and in addition to the crippling rates which have been lodged by Darebin Council, my question is really about the Save Strathallan Open Space Community Coalition, of which I am the secretary. And I ask, who does the council think will coordinate, energise and provide the volunteer resources to support the local community's obvious desire to save the Strathallan open space, which has been described in this chamber as the most significant environmental piece of land within the Darebin Council area?
Thank you for that question, Mr Berryman. Council officers have reassessed the Strathallan Golf Club rates and will continue to work with the club on the statutory process required for Council to reissue the 2019-20 rate notice at the reduced property valuation to the figure agreed to by both Strathallan Golf Club and the Darebin City Council in line with the consent orders from VCAT. This would result in the rates payable to significantly decrease in line with previous year's rates payable. To assist Strathallan Golf Club with the financial hardship it is currently experiencing due to COVID-19, the club will have the option to defer the 19-20 fourth instalment payment and all of the 2021 instalment payments until the 30th of June 2021. The land is zoned public park and recreation zone, which is the highest level of protection that open space can have through the Victorian Planning Scheme, and both Darebin Council and the Victorian Minister for Planning have expressed long-term commitment to this site being open space. Council has long advocated for this site to remain as open space, and this has also been confirmed by the Victorian Minister for Planning in July 2018 in writing, stating that the current zoning would remain in perpetuity. Thank you. Now you have a second question,
I do have it.
and I'll just draw your attention to the question part at the end, as I said before.
Yeah, sure. Fundamentally, the question is about a motion that was passed here in May 2018. That's 706 days ago. And there were fundamentally 5 action items in that motion. I'm happy to provide that if you don't have it. But my question today is, when does the council expect to deliver the report that was requested in May 2018, 706 days ago?
Thank you for that question also, Mr Berryman. The answer is quite lengthy, so I'll try and go through it step by step.
Nice and loud, please.
Thank you. Point 1, the Latrobe valuation report was not prepared by the Valuer General but was prepared independently and is confidential for the use by the Latrobe University and Darebin City Council. Parties are not able to distribute the valuation report. So that was in relation, I think, to point 1. Advice received from the Office of the Valuer General indicated that Council is not able to seek a second valuation of the land as Council is not the landowner. Therefore, a second valuation must be requested by the landowner, who in this case is Latrobe University. Latrobe expressed no interest in seeking another valuation. Involvement from the Land Monitor was not applicable as no land was being purchased by any parties. As previously stated, due to Council not being the landowner and the engagement of the Land Monitor not being applicable, a request was not forthcoming from Council to seek a second valuation. Therefore, no correspondence was sent to Mr Colin Brooks or Mr Richard Wynne. Council officers submitted a Freedom of Information application to Latrobe University to receive a copy of the contract of sale for the acquisition of the land from the state government. Permission for a copy was not granted. However, council officers were permitted to view the contract at the Latrobe offices. Upon viewing, there was no special clauses addressing implied requirements, retentions, covenants or legal restrictions on the land. Firstly, we note that a report was not provided and this should have occurred earlier. The land is zoned public park and recreation zone, which is the highest level of protection that open space can have through the Victorian planning scheme, and that both the Darebin Council and the Victorian Minister for Planning have expressed a long-term commitment to the site being open space. Council has long advocated for this site to remain as open space. This has also been confirmed by the Victorian Minister for Planning in July 2018 in writing stating the current zoning would remain in perpetuity. In meetings throughout 2019 with Strathallan Golf Course representatives, Council advised that it would not be seeking to purchase the land and have included the land in Council's open space strategy. Should Council have considered acquisition of the land, it should be noted that it would do so at the current market valuation with no considerations for any restrictions on the land. A report will go to Council on the 9th of June 2020, so in just a few weeks. Thank you for those two questions.
A third question, and my third question is, in your first statement there, you said that the valuation obtained by La Trobe cannot be used. What was the rest of that sentence, please?
The La Trobe valuation report was not prepared by the Valuer General, but was prepared independently and is confidential for confidential use only by La Trobe University and Darebin City Council. Parties are not able to distribute the valuation report.
So does that say that that valuation could not be used as the basis for the rates that have been lodged for Strathallan?
I'll refer that to the Manager of Finance. Mr Hogan? It may be taken on notice. Yep, okay. We will take that question on notice, thank you, which means Mr Hogan will get back to you.
Thank you.
Noting also that you have a meeting on Wednesday, and so we should be able to provide the answer then. The next question is from Ms Paletti. Ms Paletti is not here, so I will read that question. Mr Erlandson, you've got a couple of questions. I'm very happy for you to read Ms Paletti's question. I'm sure she'd be happy with that, so by all means, please come and read that question if you wish.
Thank you. Chris Erlandson from Preston, through you, Madam Mayor. My questions, I have three. Do you want me to just ask one and then you can respond, or? Yes,
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Please, could you speak up, please? Yeah.
Okay. So I'm speaking on behalf of Ms Paletti of Dada. Council's own Good Governance Charter states, "We make our decisions in accordance with the 6 principles of our Good Governance Charter: transparency, accountability, equity and inclusion, effectiveness and efficiency, community engagement and ethical decision making." This council has had over 3 years to prove transparency. Councillors in the chamber made election promises of real transparency. If this is the case, the first question is, will Council release to the public, as soon as they have them, any report they commission on behalf of their constituents?
Thank you for that question to Ms Paletti, and thanks for reading it. It gives me a break, which is great. Council is unable to make such an absolute statement, as reports can be commissioned by Council that contain confidential information, be it commercial, contractual or other. I do note that there was concern about the reports on the market and that those have now been released as part of this agenda.
Question 2. Will Council immediately move to advertise, release General Council meeting agendas and related documents at least 1 week prior to the meeting?
Thank you also for that question. Council's governance rules, the meeting procedure and Common Seal Local Law Clause 12 stipulates that at least 6 days before a scheduled meeting, the agenda must be delivered to each councillor and published on Council's website. That is our expectation. Every so often we don't meet those 6 days, and I apologise for that. That is absolutely the expectation of what will be delivered.
Her question 3 is, will Council agree to record voting patterns in the General Council meeting minutes and Planning Committee meeting minutes?
Council's governance rules, the meeting procedure and Common Seal local law, clause 42.1 stipulates that the Mayor will call the names of councillors, both for and against, of all motions and amendments except procedural matters, and that's a change that was made in the last governance local law. So that change that Ms Paletti has requested is actually now part of the governance local law.
Can I...
the CEO may add something there.
no, sorry, Mayor. I was just before, Chris, you ask your questions, not Maria's questions. Councillors, can I just check that you can all hear now? Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. Sorry, Chris.
Okay. So my questions, I've got 2 hats really. So I'm representing Save Our Preston Market. Open space is in short supply in Darebin, we know, in particular in the central Preston and West Preston suburbs or areas. Save Our Preston Market, state government and council surveys show that the quality of the open space in Preston Market is highly valued by the community. Question 1, has council considered in any planning strategy the considerable loss of open space to Darebin if Preston Market is demolished and moved to Kramer Street so that the remainder of the site can be developed to maximum capacity?
I'll get you to read both of these because my answer relates to both of them. Thanks, Chris.
The next one. Question 2 is, how will council replace the loss of open space at Preston Market with only a 10% open space levy when it is clear from the objections to that levy that major owners at the Preston Market do not want to pay it?
Thank you for those questions, Chris. In relation to the open space levy, I would just like to note that we heard just a week or 2 ago that Monash was unsuccessful in their bid to have a 10% open space levy. I know that this has been an issue of contention with a feeling that perhaps our 10% was not ambitious enough. It remains the most ambitious ask of any local government in Victoria, and I certainly hope that we achieve that, given that Monash was actually unsuccessful in reaching that benchmark. I note that there is an item on Council's agenda relating to the Preston Market precinct tonight, and I note that without prejudicing Council's later decision, I'm going to answer the question based on Council's most recent decision on that matter. Council has long recognised that the open space within the Preston Market precinct is really valued and that it plays a very important role as a social space in Preston. We also think that there is not enough open space more broadly in central Preston, and there is a gap clearly shown in breathing space, Council's adopted open space strategy. Because of this, Council has called for open space to be increased within the Preston Market precinct. In 2019, Council called for 3 things. Firstly, that in any development scenario, we would like to see all of the open space within the Preston Market, including the wide walkways, cruciform intersections, protected through planning controls. Secondly, we called for a minimum of 10% of the whole of the rest of the Preston Market site to become new, usable green open space that is fully accessible to the whole community. And I think that's an important distinction to draw as opposed to a car park, which couldn't be called quality open space. Thirdly, we called for a contribution of up to a further 8% of the value of the Preston Market site. This would be for improvements to open space near the site. Outside of the market walkways, there is no open space within the site at present, so these objectives would see a substantial amount of new, usable green space opened up for our whole community to enjoy.
Okay. My final question. Have all councillors read in full the reports attached to tonight's agenda?
Thank you, and I cannot answer to what councillors have or haven't read. You could contact them outside of this meeting and ask yourself. What I would say is that in accordance with the local law, council agendas and all accompanying reports are made available to both councillors and the public in advance of the meeting in time for reports to be reviewed. Reports for this meeting were made available last Wednesday, and I'm certainly very confident of the commitment of my colleagues to diligently reviewing and considering all matters that come before council. Thank you for those questions, Mr. Erlandson.
Mayor Reddy, just a point of clarification. Just in relation to one of the questions, in regards to the recording of voting, just to get clarification, I may not have heard it, is that apart from you saying who voted which way in the meeting, does it actually get recorded in the minutes who actually voted for or against the motion?
Yes, it does. So that's the purpose of my calling those names, to make sure they can be documented. Those new governance local law principles only just came into effect. So that is, I think, a significant commitment by this council to transparency, that this council voted to make all votes recorded in terms of how people vote. I'll now ask if there are any further questions from members of the gallery. Keith, you put one in. I don't appear to have received it, but please come up and ask your question.
Sorry, that's mine. Keith Coffey, as you know, from Reservoir 3073. Now, I put this in last week for the other meeting, and I also put it in for this meeting, and you haven't got it. I think it's strange.
I'll follow up. I'm terribly sorry, Keith.
Yeah, well, all right. I have two questions related to the last two budget submissions I put in. Everything is still the same. The gutters, weeds everywhere in Cheddar Road and in the gutters, the roundabouts and on the plantations, and the same in where was it? In Keon Parade, and the roundabout in Hickford Street. That's a new one that I've just come across. Is the roundabout there at Cheddar Road and Hickford Street. That's right. There's bushes grown there, and it blocks the vision of the people walking across the road. And like that's very hard. It's all right while the lollipop man's there. But other neighbours in the street there have told me the same thing, so it's not only me. They can't see. It needs cutting down. And there's a lot of streets in the ward where the roundabouts got weeds in them.
So, Mr. Coffey, I'll ask if you could move to your question.
Oh, yeah, but the whole thing's relevant, especially when I get to the second question. All right, well, if that's the way you want it. But it just goes to prove that things were better when you had more hands-on council staff to do the jobs. You could get things done, not repeatedly ask questions about getting things done. Well, I'll go on to the second ones. About 18 months ago, I informed Darren Rudd, the planning manager, about tripping hazards at 91 and 93 Darebin Boulevard. The concrete's cracked, it's sunken, and that went on for a long time. Then I happened to bump into Rachel at a meeting at the Hub, so I put the question to her, and she said, all right. She got Michael, the bylaws officer, to come down. He took photos and went away. Months later, never heard nothing. Bumped into Darren. He said, oh, yeah, it's in hand. And here we are 18 months later, and it's still not even done. And that's, to me, the only reason I brought it up to Darren to start with was that it was a developer's problem, and I couldn't see why the ratepayers are going to have to pay to get it done. And here we are nearly 2 years later. It looks like the ratepayers are going to have to pay to when it does get done, if it ever gets done.
Okay.
The other comment I made, it's how many times you have to report things. Yeah, because a lot of things I've put over the last 2 years, I have to report them. I know I'm criticising you, but I think it's well put at this time. But the last 2 years, I reckon the council meetings are not running like they were. I've seen it a lot because I've been around for 50-odd years.
Thank you, Mr.
Seen
Coffey.
the good and the bad and all.
Okay. I take on board your feedback, and I apologise if you have found that those things have not been actioned. I will ask if you could leave with us a list of any concerns, those
There's that
locations.
many, I'd have to spend a lot of time writing them. They used to have, in the past, we used to have your council workers going round. You used to have Mr. Walker. You made a big thing about it in the papers years ago.
So can I let you know, in response to that, I'm pleased to be able to let you know that during this period of COVID-19, we've had a significant number of staff redeployed. No, I'm sorry. Mr. Coffey, please let me tell you that we've had hundreds of staff redeployed. Many of those staff have actually been redeployed to undertake a complete audit of all of the assets that you're talking about, so that they are walking literally every metre of the footpaths to note down and do exactly what you're asking for, which is to note down the cracks, the bumps, the weeds, and to actually make sure that we have that condition audit so that we can action all of those things.
Yeah, but this thing all started 2 years ago or 18 months ago, long before the virus came. The virus has only
Mr.
been
Coffey,
there
I
since Christmas.
accept that, and the reason we're doing a condition audit is because we want to make sure that we get on top of those items that you're identifying to us, and that we are able to do that. But certainly I think the officers have noted in relation to 91 and 93 Darebin Boulevard that you've expected some follow-up. Ms Wilkinson?
Mr. Coffey, thank you.
One of my last things I was complaining about, the toilet. The lady you put me on to, she's been following up things, but I'm still monitoring it. It still hasn't improved much.
Okay, I'll just get the CEO to also make a comment.
She's doing her job, that's one thing.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Yes, there's a gentleman there. I'm sorry I can't recognise you. If you could state your name for the meeting, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Rennie. My name's Peter Roberts. I'm the president of the Strathallan Golf Club, and as already mentioned, there is a bit of an issue between council and the golf club dealing with rates. I have put in 3 questions via an email, and unfortunately on the web page that I was looking at, it indicated that questions could be lodged by, or had to be lodged by 3 p.m. Apparently that's not the case, so that would explain why you may probably have got no knowledge of these questions. But if I can just sort of quickly say at least 2 of the questions. The first one is, given the fact that under the Darebin City Council's annual budget for the 2019-20 year, Council is anticipating to raise $130 million from various revenue streams. Of this amount, $129 million is attributed to general rates. Within the rates revenue under the heading recreational, and I've taken that to include cultural and recreational entities, a nominal amount of $45,705 is shown. I repeat that, $45,705. My question is Darebin City Council prepared to make a commitment of support for each of the 10 entities falling within the cultural and recreational umbrella by waiving on a permanent basis any perceived potential annual rates liability that may be attributed to each and every one of the 10 entities?
Thank you very much for that question, Peter, and I apologise if there was confusion about when they had to be received.
Understandable, no problem.
I'll
and
refer...
it might be that you might want to refer it to somebody and come back at a later point.
Yes,
okay.
So refer to Mr Hogan, who will take it on notice, and I do note that we're meeting with you on Wednesday, so I would expect...
All right. Second question is noting that Strathallan Golf Club is a non-profit organisation. We have had this long-standing rates issue, and it has caused a fair bit of stress on certain people in the club, including and in particular the Committee of Management, which I'm obviously on as president. And compounding the situation is we've had the coronavirus crisis, and I'm sure all councillors are aware that, like Bundoora Park, Strathallan Golf Club has been required to close its doors for about 6 weeks. So That's had a significant financial effect on the club. And I think you would also be aware that notwithstanding we're closed, like any other golf course or club, we have to still incur significant amounts in just maintaining the course ready for reopening. My question is, are councillors, as part of an open and transparent process, prepared to meet with representatives of the golf club and the Save Strathallan Open Space Community Coalition to hear the concerns given the actions of council and thus be in a fully informed position to make an assessment of the appropriate action to be taken to resolve this matter? Now, sorry, I qualify that, and I've got a third question. I'll leave that because I've been in contact with by Mr. Hogan, and we'll, how can I say, we'll let that progress and see what results. But if it isn't finalised or resolved, this question, question 2, becomes highly relevant.
Thank you also for that question. Councillor Amir?
Mayor, I'd like to move that we extend question time by 10 minutes.
Thank you. That's moved and seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? Thank you. That was just a procedural motion to make sure we don't run out of time. So thank you. I'm aware that you have a meeting on Wednesday. It's my most sincere hope that the differences are able to be resolved and that we can turn over a new leaf and move forward in a way that meets the expectations of both council and the club in relation to rates. And I've no doubt that you will be back in touch with councillors if you feel as though that's required after that meeting.
That's guaranteed. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Yes, Mr. Nugent.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I have 3 questions also tonight. Mayor Rennie, the first one is about, as one of the leaders of the city, will you and the CEO and senior managers and councillors take a 20% pay cut in their salaries or reimbursements and give it to the needy in this city caused by this coronavirus?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Nugent. No, there is no proposal that there would be any pay cuts. I think it is worth noting that councillors are reimbursed $30,000 a year or so for their time, and that's considerable time, and that's not a significant amount. As the Mayor, I do receive a full-time income, but I think that if there's a misconception in the community that councillors are somehow overpaid for their time, then that should be corrected.
No, I don't think so, but I just realised most councillors do work and they do get a reimbursement, but that's fine, you answer the question. Mayor Rennie, my second question, is there any specific spending in this budget to bring back Edwards Lake back to the jewel of the north in the city of Darebin by improving the water quality for bird life, boating and even water skiing? Or can we get a report as per Councillor Gaetano Greco asked for on the 13th of the 5th, 20? Councillors, I want to remind all of you how much this council spent on the Mary Creek in the southern part of the city.
Mr. Nugent, thank you for that question. Council has an ongoing commitment to actually ensuring that Edwards Park Lake is, and Edwards Park is a wonderful place for many members of the community, and there is significant investment going into looking at models for that area. Ms. Olivier, I might see if you'd like to add anything.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. So the draft budget which has been released includes sort of maintenance and cleaning and all of those normal things that council does to care for the lake. There isn't a specific project to investigate changing that. Thank
you, Ms. Olivier. And I think it's worth noting that Councillors are very committed to the quality of the water catchment. One of the things that's been identified is that the biggest obstacle to improved water quality in Edwards Lake is the water coming in from the entire catchment, which includes many hundreds of kilometres of creeks and waterways spanning right up into Melbourne's growth areas. I think that, Mr Nugent, I hear your desire, which is shared by members of this council, to see that water quality improve, and that's going to take significant state government investment and changes at an EPA level to actually improve the quality of water that is in water catchments right across Melbourne's northern metropolitan area. Thank you for the questions.
All right, my third and final question for tonight. Mayor Rennie, could you please advise why this council did not help the former VFL Preston Football Club, also known as the Northern Blues, to stay afloat? My question is, if it's good enough to help the Darebin Falcons to play in the VFLW, then it's good enough to help the Bull Ants stay in the VFL. We cannot have double standards in this council.
Mr Nugent, thank you for that question. I'm not familiar with the financial settings of the club, so I'll take that on notice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? There are none, so we'll move into the next part of the agenda. Before we do so and enter into debate on motions, I would like to remind councillors of my expectations in relation to our behaviour and our obligations under the Code of Conduct. At Darebin, we pride ourselves on being a progressive and contemporary council. In the interests of demonstrating exemplary leadership, I have high expectations that we will all be professional in our conduct throughout the evening and respectful in our debate. It is important for both councillors and the community to remember that our council chamber is both a workplace and a public space, and that we have an obligation to ensure that the working environment and public forums are safe for everyone, both emotionally as well as physically. I want to be clear that I will not tolerate any form of personal acrimony or insult, grandstanding or yelling, nor will I put up with talking over the top of one another or any use of unreasonable or impolite language or interjections from the gallery. So we'll now move into the consideration of reports. Oh, petitions, there are none unless am I mistaken, there are no petitions. So we'll move into consideration of reports. Yes, Councillor Williams?
For the first one?
Well,
oh, no, not Councillor. I don't have any petitions or...
No, so I was just wondering whether the standard process is, and I'll remind all councillors that the standard process is that we don't move to a motion until we've had an opportunity to ask questions. So the first thing is to ask the relevant council officers for item 7.1 to come up to the front. Ms Bishop. Mr Erlinson, I hadn't been informed that you wish to make a submission, but I'm guessing that's on item 7.5. We'll have submissions prior to the item, so I'll come back to you, and please raise your hand if it appears that I'm not doing that. Okay. Councillors, before I seek a motion, are there any questions of the officers in relation to item 7.1? Yes, Councillor Messina.
Can I please confirm that these are the dates that were required and requested by Councillor Lawrence, because there was some discrepancy when he previously applied for some leave?
Yes. Over to Ms Bishop. Or...
Through you, Mayor Rennie, yes, I can confirm that these dates are correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Happy to move the motion. Happy to second.
Okay, so I've got an indication from Councillor Williams. I will just ask councillors that I will, when I'm looking for a motion, actually specifically say I'll now invite a motion. So please wait for me to say that. That avoids any situation where anyone who's just a bit slow to ask a question gets cut off. But Councillor Williams, you're happy to move the officer recommendation. Councillor Messina, happy to second that. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence has requested leave of absence on from April the 24th to May the 24th on the basis for his ongoing medical treatment that he's receiving. The absence will cover Councillor Lawrence from all council duties, including council planning, briefing, committees and events, not just council meetings. I'd just like to wish Councillor Lawrence all the best.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Messina?
Nothing further, just to wish Councillor Lawrence a speedy recovery.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously and it will be recorded as a unanimous decision. We're now on to item 7.2, the 2019-20 Quarter 3 report. Councillors, I'll start once again by asking if anyone has any questions in relation to this item. Councillor Greco?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just had a couple of questions in relation to this item. Firstly, just on page 31, looking at goal number 5, in particular looking at the MOU with the Preston Mosque, I just wanted to get a few more details regarding where exactly we are at in finalising an MOU with the mosque.
Thank you for that question. I might refer that to Ms McGrath.
Thank you. Through Mayor Rennie, I'd probably need to take that one on notice, Councillor. I know that things will advance, but I think COVID-19 might have put a slight delay to things, but I can certainly follow that up.
I think Ms Wilkinson might have some more up-to-date information.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, and sorry, I've been here a bit longer, so I've got a bit more contemporary information. The MOU was signed late last year, so it's been updated and formalised. So there was a small ceremony with the mosque, and we're working very well together.
Thank you. Councillor Greco, you indicated you had a second question?
Yes, I just had some other questions, if I may. Sure. The other question is in relation to page 31 about the Job Ready programs, and I just wanted to get a sense of what the time frame is in regards to achieving those Job Ready programs.
Thank you for that question. Ms Bishop?
Through you, Mayor Rennie, yep, we're progressing well on that one. We've identified a whole suite of different service providers. We're looking at it from gender, lower socio-economic, diverse backgrounds, Aboriginal. So we've expanded that brief on that one as well. And we're looking for setting up the new program to kick off early next financial year.
Thank you. Councillor Greco?
Yeah, and just two more questions. And the next question is in regards to page 32. And it's in regards to developing and delivering Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and refugee mentoring programs across council. I understand the issues in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, but there's no mention there in the comments section about what we are doing in regards to refugees.
Ms McGrath again.
Again, through Mayor Rennie, and hopefully soup. So certainly we're, as you've made mention, Councillor, we're progressing swiftly on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander front in terms of the mentoring. I'd probably have to say in terms of the refugee area, we're not as far advanced as we would like to be, but we're certainly in our focus.
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson again.
Through you, Mayor, if I can just add, thank you for the question, Councillor. So there's been some changes in the community development team to really increase and emphasise the focus in those two areas. One of the big things that we've done is turn a part-time role, an Aboriginal Employment Officer role, into a full-time role. I'm very proud of the appointment that we've made with one of the leaders, Aboriginal leaders in the community, who's been appointed to that role and is, I can confirm, having a significant impact on the organisation. Similarly, we've had really very deeply experienced people in working refugees. In fact, people who have lived experience as refugees now join council Their appointment was a little bit behind the Aboriginal Employment Officer, and so it's really starting to gather momentum now. So I'm quite confident that we're on the right track.
Thank you.
And just a final question, if I may. It's in relation to the financial statements. On page 48, just so that we're clear, just to get some clarification and understanding, I'm trying to ascertain exactly how much money the council has in the bank, both deposits that are under 90 days and deposits that are over 90 days. So if I can get a figure in relation to the total deposit that we have in the bank in regards to the balance sheet for the end of this financial year projected.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Greco. Mr Hogan.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. So looking at our total cash position, so our cash on page 48, under current assets, our cash and cash equivalents, our forecast of 21,587,000, that's based on our cash in the bank and any term deposits that are less than 90 days. Under current assets, under other financial assets, the Q3 forecast figure of 33,701,000, that's based on any term deposits that are greater than 90 days. So if we wanted to look at our total cash position or our forecast, it's the addition of those two amounts, which equals $55,288,000.
Thank you, Mr Hogan.
Just in the interest of completeness, it's important to remember that that's at 31st March. So there's obviously been a significant change to the economic environment since then, but at 31st March, that was the correct figure.
Just clarification on that. I'm referring to the column that it's the third quarter forecast for the end of the financial year.
Okay, thank you, Mr Hogan.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. That's right. However, this was at 31st of March. So when the forecast was done, it was based on the projections as of the 31st of March.
Thank you, Mr Hogan. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Rennie. I'd like to direct the office, or through goal number 6, item number, improve permit process for businesses to make it simpler to do business in Darebin. We've undertaken a trial business concierge system. Could you please tell me when that report is due to come to council, and just a quick few words on how that's going, please?
Thank you, Councillor Messina. I'll refer that question to Ms Olivier.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. So the concierge approach essentially means that businesses for a number of months now have been able to deal with one person, even if they're needing multiple things from council. We've had some really great feedback from it. And I think it was some large number of forms have actually been rationalised into one form. So it's something that the officers involved have been really pleased with. We haven't been specifically planning to put a report to council on that matter.
Okay. Thank you, Ms Olivier. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. If I draw attention to Goal 5 and just in relation to the implementation and review of the Language Aid and Multilingual Service Review, just a question in relation to how Council has managed to in fact halve the time it takes to respond to queries through that service. It's a pretty impressive outcome from 40 seconds down to 20 seconds. And also to understand what are the additional languages that are now available through that service.
Thank you for the question, Councillor McCarthy. Ms Bishop.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor Rennie. So it's mainly been a technological solution, and obviously with ongoing training for our staff, which has actually increased the service level. With regard to the different languages, I'm going to have to take that on notice because I know I'm going to actually call out the wrong ones, and I don't want to give you the wrong information, so I'll circulate that tomorrow. Thank you, Mayor Rennie.
Thank you, Ms Bishop. Councillors, are there any further questions? There are no further questions, so I'll now seek to find if there is a motion. Councillor McCarthy, the recommendation?
Happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Amir. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you also to our officers across the organisation for their work in putting together this report. Despite the challenges that our community faces, that our local businesses face, and that council faces due to obviously the COVID-19 situation, we have a report here which obviously provides an outline of both the financial side of council, but also the outcome side of council, as we have sought to do throughout this term. And I would just reinforce to councillors, in fact, that this is not a method of reporting that existed in previous terms of council. The quarterly action plan was not something that ever existed, and I think it's a fantastic innovation of this council and delivers real, as close as possible real-time reporting and accountability and transparency. So I just wanted to make that comment first of all, and appreciate the work that goes into putting it together. And I'm sure that many in our community find this information, if they're interested, easy to access and valuable. I wanted just to highlight a couple of points here, and one is that there are, despite the COVID situation, there are some incredible changes that have been implemented in this quarter and as part of an ongoing program. And I asked the question because I was struck by the efficiency that's been achieved with the Language and Multicultural Aid Service, which is quite incredible for people calling council potentially for the first time to have half the time they had to wait previously, is an incredible achievement, because it actually means that we get people to the outcomes that they are seeking, which is information about a service or support from council. And in a time of COVID-19, it is absolutely important that responsiveness continues. I also wanted to just draw, apart from the financial report, which is there and it's self-evident for council to see what the outcomes are, I just wanted to draw to councillors' attention that there are some projects that have been achieved in this quarter, literally in recent weeks, despite the restrictions, that have in fact been projects that have been on council's radar or council's books for many years past. And one in particular, which is dear to residents in my ward of Rucker Ward, is of course the Merry Parade and Union Street intersection, which has been a long time coming, is only through the dogged persistence of local community and our transport team to actually get that over the line, to get it through Vic Roads. So we have these small stories of achievement despite the great challenges. There are projects that are facing a challenge because of physical and social restrictions. It's clear in the report what those are. And I just would encourage councillors to not only look for those opportunities to improve, but also celebrate the small things that are often through collaboration between our council officers and community. And last of all, I just point out that we have obviously seen obviously a reduction in income, and we will see those challenges. We've framed a budget at the last meeting, and we have a positive outlook getting on with the job.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Amir.
Thanks, Mayor Rennie. So what we have here is the financial statements and reporting on action items for Q3 of this financial year. It is a bit of an unusual situation in that what we have here in the report is neither sort of a baseline of the pre-COVID days, nor is it a clear picture of where we're at now. It's a bit kind of in the middle, and that was clear in one of the questions asked of councillors already by councillors. Already we've moved on from this Q3, so it is indeed challenging circumstances with further challenges to come. And I absolutely wanted to echo the sentiments of Councillor McCarthy in giving my thanks and congratulations to the staff who have been able to deliver so much in often quite challenging circumstances. And some of the highlights in the report are, of course, the response to the pandemic with food security programs, homelessness outreach, and the business support. We've had the development or drafting of the waste and recycling strategy, and of course, ongoing rollout of the food waste collection, planting 400 trees, renewal of footpaths, road safety projects, including our Streets for People projects. We've had to have a pivot of the Fuse Festival, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, with the shift from the Backyard Harvest Festival to the Backyard Harvest Stories. And I am quite disappointed that we weren't able to see our first Fuse Festival come to fruition, but I hope that we can either later this year or in future years. Most of the actions listed here are on track, underway, and again, as we've heard earlier this evening, that some things are even being fast-tracked, with the footpath assessment being an example, and tree planting with the redeployment program. In a council term, we have 16 quarters. We've now had 14 with 2 to go, so I'm sure that councillors and staff are united in delivering on the plan in the final 2.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Are there further speakers? Councillor Messina.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just want to echo the words of Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Amir, but I want to also highlight the changes that we've done in waste. I want to thank all councillors who have come along that journey with us. I also want to highlight a couple of projects here, and one of them that I was extremely proud of, and that is the High Design Expectations documentation, that the Excellence Awards that we've announced, and also develop the future of this particular municipality, the 50-year city plan, which unfortunately will be produced in a later date, but I look forward to that particular report. And in addition, the work that we've undertaken at Preston Central, and I note that during the pandemic, that's not due until 2021, but we've done a lot in that particular space, so I look forward to more development in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any further speakers? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 7.3. I'll firstly ask the relevant officers to come up the front. Mr Sagona. Councillors, are there any questions to begin with? Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. It's just a question, and it obviously it's covered in the report, and councillors have been briefed on some of the matters pertaining to population growth rates, but specifically in relation to point 3 and point B of point 3, which refers to the disparity between wards A and D over the future term. I just wanted to understand the source of the population projections that Council relies upon in terms of putting this point to the Minister, if we can just get a little bit of expansion on that point from our officers.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Mr Sagona.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mayor Rennie. The population figures relied upon here come from Council's population demographers and forecasters ID, who are a company that prepare forecasts for, among others, many local governments in Victoria and indeed across Australia. The most recent figures were May 2018. They're the most recent set of population forecasts. And what we've undertaken internally is a process of overlaying the small population forecast areas, of which there are 14 across Darebin, overlaying them, or overlaying the proposed ward boundaries over them, and applying the relevant proportion of growth rates that are occurring in each small area to those wards. So it's a little bit of an inexact science, but it's probably the best that we've got to go with just at the moment.
Mayor, if I may ask a supplementary in relation to the comments we've just received?
Yes.
Just to understand, given the point of advocacy for this recommendation is to the Minister, would, in our view, the projections that we have made based on those data sets just described be consistent or relatively consistent with what a state government agency such as Local Government Victoria would also be considering? Are we talking about the same numbers in the future?
Thank you for the question, Mr Sagona.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Rennie. So Local Government Victoria will have been using figures, the maps and the data have been prepared by VEC. I don't specifically know which figures the VEC would typically rely upon. However, the ID figures tend to be the ones that are tend to be looked upon. So I don't have specific information about which figures they've relied upon on this occasion.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Messina.
There was through you, Marini, there was a budget allocation for the council elections amount of monetary item. Could you please tell me that's going to be enough to comply with what's required based on this report?
Thank you. Don't know if that's Mr Sagona or Ms Bishop.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, we've anticipated that all costs will be absorbed. Should through the process anything be identified, we'll certainly be coming back to Council.
Councillors, are there any further questions? No, I'll therefore call for a motion. Councillor McCarthy, as recommended.
As recommended.
Thank you. A seconder? Councillor Newton. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you also to our officer for those comments. I asked those questions in particular because it's in making the recommendation that we do, and Councillor Newton may wish to expand on this, covering part of the ward that's described there. It's absolutely imperative that the projections that are considered in terms of the proposed boundaries are actually based on the most up-to-date data, and as we've already heard this evening, our officers have done a fine-grained analysis of the data based on what we know and have done their best job in terms of identifying one of the challenges that has been thrown up, which is the challenge of growth. And the challenge of growth when you move from without support from our community, I would point out, and certainly without support from this council, move from 3 multi-member wards, 3 by 3, which was unanimously supported multi-member wards at the last representation review, not only by DARAB, not only by submitters, but also, of course, by the VEC itself in its assessment, to a situation with 9 single-member wards. So there's the matter of electoral boundaries, which is important, and we have an argument there which has been put forward by officers for the Minister to consider. Probably of more significance to some extent is the complete lack of time for our community to be able to engage with this process in any meaningful way. On 2 fronts, in fact. One is, of course, the proposed ward boundaries. I've watched with interest to see some residents, keen watchers of council business and state government business, be surprised by how quickly this has been brought on and the limited time for any, in fact, the complete lack of any open, positive engagement process that really supports our community to engage. But probably more consistently, and this is in line with both Council's commitment to walking alongside and standing alongside Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, including traditional owners, and we would like to think that that commitment is shared by state government, is that we have made a very clear submission last year to the VEC saying that we believe as a council that council wards should be named in line and with advice from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and the Land Council, and in this case, there is simply not the time to go through any of that sort of process. So I fully endorse the recommendation that's been put forward, which is that the Minister, if he is to advance this current arrangement to have 9 single-member wards, which we maintain our opposition to, then at the very least to not arbitrarily name them or give them the same names as were in place before 2008, but in fact to just simply name them the letters as listed and allow Council, as we have flagged, to undertake a process in partnership with our community, and particularly the Wurundjeri Council, to look at what are appropriate names that reflect the Indigenous history of this area. That is the just and right thing to do. I think it's certainly something that a significant number of people in our community would support, and we hope that the Minister takes on board that proposal and gives it his support.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. Can you hear me? Yep. Or
a little louder, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So when I shared that this was going to happen to us in Darebin recently, people said on my post, what can I do? How can we stop this? But there isn't a chance to do that because we're not getting the chance to consult the community on this. This is something that's going to come to us with new wards by October when we have elections. There's no time for our community to get used to this, no time for them to understand what the changes mean, and no chance for them to input what they think should happen. But I was involved in the process last year, both through the council submission and through an individual submission. So I heard some of the other submitters. I read all the submissions, I spoke to the VEC, and pretty much everyone in this community wanted to stay multi-member. So I think it's really important that we put this motion forward today that has such a strong sense of disappointment in what the Minister for Local Government has decided for this community that we don't want. And I do agree with the officer's recommendation that A and D are D might change quite a lot. So we really need to be careful there. I do hope that the Minister takes that on board. It's one of the few things we've been able to do with the time that we have, which is so limited. I also heard from so many submitters that they really, really would like Warringi Warang language for the wards, and we know that that takes time. I'm on the Darwin and Aboriginal Advisory Committee. We know that anything like that requires really deep consultation with the community, with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and it's again one of these things where, you know, I'm forgetting when we talk about A, B, C, D, and I look forward to, I really hope that that's at least something that the Minister takes on board, that this is something the community really wants. I'm disappointed by the change, but it's something we have to progress with. Yep, and the last thing is that I'm worried it will mean that things will become more parochial.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there further speakers? Councillor Messina.
I'm happy to endorse the officer's recommendation, but I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed that this new single-member ward becomes a battle of political parties. Sadly for Darebin, the new single-member wards will equate to the demise of the independent. Not only the demise of the independent, but statistical data that it's been lodged, it'll be the demise of the independent female voice. So I just want to lodge my disappointment in terms of the single-member wards, and it's a sad day for Darebin and a sad day for independents.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. I have an amendment that I'd like councillors to consider. I've just submitted it. It's not many words, and it should appear on the screen soon.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. We'll just get those words up. Councillor Greco, can you read that out?
The amendment should be slightly different than that. It should, and I apologise for this, it should say that we write to the Minister that we are writing to the Wurundjeri.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Can I get you to read out that amendment in full as it now is on the screen in case anyone is unable to see the screen?
And I apologise for the language, it's a bit clumsy, but I think the intent is clear. That we write to the Minister advising that we are writing to the Wurundjeri Wurrung Council, advising them that we will be seeking their active... Advice. Can't see the last word.
Advice.
Regarding ward names for future consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Lesurf.
Do I have an opportunity to ask a question, given that this is an amendment?
Yes, so there will be an opportunity, and we might make that opportunity now before I ask. I don't need a seconder if it's accepted by the mover and the seconder. So firstly, I'll ask, are the mover and seconder willing to accept this amendment?
Could we hear Councillor Lesurf's question first? Because I may have the same question.
I think it's sensible actually to get questions so that the mover and seconder can make an informed decision as to whether they accept it. So, yes.
I'll ask my question. I just wanted to ask a question following on our briefing last week, whether we had reached out to the Wurundjeri Wurrung Council since then to, I guess, gauge their interest in participating in this process.
Thank you. Mr. Sigona?
Thank you for the question. No, we hadn't as yet. Certainly, as I remember the discussion last week, was pending the resolution tonight that we would seek their support going forward from here in terms of at least seeking a letter from them to support our request to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Sigona. Councillor Newton?
Through you, Mayor Rennie. So I'd like to ask a question about the amendment in terms of if this is in council's scope, when it's quite possible that when this goes forward, we might still see the Minister say it's going to be called, A is going to be called this, B is going to be called this. So is it in council's scope to do that, what's asked of in that amendment?
Mr. Sigona?
Thanks for the question. Through you, Mayor Rennie, I don't see a problem with advising the Minister that we would be writing to the Wurundjeri to advise them that we'll be seeking their advice. Perhaps the rider that we would include in any letter is that should the matter be taken out of our hands, then it becomes a moot point.
Thank you, Mr. Scona. Any final questions on the amendment?
Mayor, I don't have glasses and the text is small, so and I don't actually own glasses, but the text is still too small for me. I'm just trying to understand, if I can ask through you, whether point 5, there's any consistency issues in relation between point 5 and 4A, which seem to refer to the same thing, but one of them progresses an action, the other one foreshadows an action. If we can get some advice there, please.
Thank you, Mr. Scona.
Thank you, Mayor Rennie. No, look, reading those, I don't think they're inconsistent. It's probably 4B that foreshadows a process of consultation.
Sorry, I meant 4B. Sorry.
Yeah. Number 5 simply says that we're advising the Minister specifically of the particular group that we would consult with.
If I can just be clear though, if I can just get clarification, 3 refers to Council writing to the Minister. 4 is actually not writing to the Minister. So 5 would be alerting the Minister to what 4 contains. Is that correct?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson?
Through you, Mayor Rennie, I think it's a good point, Councillor, and in fact I think the officer recommendation could be strengthened by repeating the words at point 4 that Council writes to the Minister in relation to the naming of the proposed wards, states 4A, B, C and 5, if Council was of a mind to incorporate point 5. I think that's the intent, but it's not, it could be clearer.
Okay, I'd like to return to the question at hand, which is whether this amendment is acceptable to the mover and the seconder, keeping in mind that I think the intent is clear, and if you support the intent and you believe the intent is clear, then you might decide to accept the amendment.
Happy to accept.
And trust that the officers will make sure that all things occur in a timely way and in a culturally appropriate way.
If I can just say...
We need to deal with this amendment.
Might help us move past this amendment.
I can't hear that.
Councillor Greco, I think people are possibly struggling with the words but not the intent of the amendment. So nevertheless, we have to deal with this amendment.
For the purposes of debate, I'll accept the amendment, Mayor, but on the basis of my understanding is that it can be further amended by other councillors if they wish. Is that correct?
I'll just seek clarification on that. Yep. Yes.
On that basis, I'm happy to accept it, but I appreciate the wording issue.
Councillor Newton?
Happy to accept.
Thank you. Councillor Greco, your amendment has been accepted. It now forms part. So would you care to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Rennie. Look, I won't speak to the rest of the motion. I think other councillors have said enough in relation to that. In relation to the amendment that I put forward, and I thank the councillors for accepting the amendment, is that it's pretty simple, councillors. I think some good points have been raised. I think Councillor McCarthy raised the point about consulting the Wurundjeri in relation to getting names from them. The intent of my motion is, and that's why I corrected it when it was put up there, is that we write to the Minister because we're flagging to the Minister that this is the process that we want to go through. And I think that actually strengthens our hand in regards to ensuring that the Minister does not apply names to the wards and keeps it as A, B, C, D, W, X, Y, Z, and that next year we can go through a fully proper consultation process with the Wurundjeri elders about getting the appropriate names for these wards. So I'm putting that forward as a way of strengthening, again, our position and flagging to the Minister not to take any unilateral action prior to the election in assigning names willy-nilly from his department.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Lasserf.
I'd like to put forward an amendment just so that we can tidy this up and we're all clear. To insert the words that council writes to the Minister to.
Is this at the beginning?
At the
Councillor?
beginning, yeah.
Okay.
And then I think all the adjectives need to drop the S, unfortunately. And then the fifth point would be advise. Does that make sense to everybody? No?
Yes, okay. So the motion would begin that council writes to the Minister to, and that's up the top.
To convey, to reinstate, to all of those other things underneath.
And then number 5 would begin advise that we will be writing to Laundry. So those first words come out. We'll be writing to Laundry Woiwurrung. Can we take out the words advising them that we will be seeking and just put Councillor Lasserf?
Advise that we are writing to the Wurundjeri Council
seeking
their advice regarding, yes.
Thank you for that amendment, Councillor Lasserf. I'll check, is that acceptable? Or firstly, are there any questions in relation to that amendment?
Sorry, just to be clear, has the editing been finished here? Because I just would point with these proposed words that we have now, that council writes to the Minister to, 1, convey its disappointment to the Minister for Local Government. If I can just propose that we actually, it should read that council writes to the Minister for Local Government to convey its disappointment about. Otherwise, you're saying minister to minister.
Okay. Well,
yep. So we can make that change.
Fix those.
And we need to get rid of the S's off the verbs, I think is what I said.
Okay.
But I'm happy to support the
Councillor
intent.
McCarthy, I hear it. I think we're in the realm of wordsmithing, and I can assure you that when the letter goes to the Minister, there won't be any double-ups. What I will ask is Councillor Lasserf's amendment acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
Happy to accept.
Yes. That is now the motion that we are debating. Thank you to Councillors Greco and Lasserf for that combined addition. Are there any further speakers? No, we'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried unanimously. We'll note that it was a unanimous decision. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move to item 7.4. Declaration of the special rates charge. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to this item? There being no questions, does someone have a motion to propose? Councillor McCarthy. A seconder, Councillor Lasserf. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is obviously, as councillors would be aware, the standard process when it comes to solar saver installations, and of course the process of declaring a special rate. I was very pleased with this one in particular to see in the non-residential batch, which is of course the third of our business batches, or non-residential batches, because we have had community facilities and places of worship included, to see one of our local businesses, a very popular local business being Pizza Mina Liba, to be part of this. It's terrific to see as one of the businesses that we know attracts people from well beyond Darebin's borders to come, and of course is well loved by locals to be part of this, but also to see a further 21 installations from our residential group as well. And this all adds up and contributes to the growing solar saver community in Darebin that we have recommitted to in the most recent budget, draft budget, and of course lays the groundwork for the continuation of solar saver despite the challenges that we face in a COVID-19 arrangement. In relation to the proposed installations included here, we have 5 kilowatts proposed as part of the residential component and 94.71 kilowatts of solar capacity in the residential component. So it is not as huge as some previous batches of installations, and that is for a whole range of reasons. One is to do with the current appetite and ability for people to engage in this sort of a process, but of course also because we've been working progressively through the list over recent months and years. And I would just note that, and a thanks to our officers for the flexibility that's been delivered in terms of the Solar Saver assessment process in this period, that we are able to continue to support people using technology and using flexible means and remote means as well. There are 2 companies that are engaged through the Solar Saver installation process, and I just also support the sentiments of the organisation that we support them in their work despite the COVID situation as well, and wish them all the best and their staff in this process.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Lasserf.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That decision is made unanimously. Thank you. We'll now come to item 7.5. We have a submission from Mr Erlandson. Mr Erlandson, I'll invite you to come up now and make your submission.
I actually have 2. Do I have to give my name again? Chris Erlandson. Through you, Madam Mayor. My first submission is from Maria Paletti of Dada. Dada would like to be very clear that we have never ever considered a heritage overlay to be the only tool for the protection of our beloved Preston Market, but as the first in a suite available to ensure that the market is protected from destruction and can operate in the manner most valued by the community. Having said that, we want to be sure that a heritage overlay is applied in the most effective manner. Council now has the third piece of evidence that Preston Market qualifies for a heritage overlay. The RBA review is unequivocal. It says the Preston Market has been determined to be a local historical, aesthetic, technical and social significance. As such, it is recommended that the appropriate level of heritage protection for the site is sought and enacted. A key consideration in the RBA review is the recommendation to reinstate particular distinctive elements of the design which have been removed or obscured. Reinstate is to restore something to its original position or state. We do not believe the intent is to reinstate it at a different site. We note that the assessment tool to track changes is lacking any statement in reinstating the distinctive elements of the design and would like to see that remedied. The assessment tool makes an assumption that the market will be redeveloped. See Objective 1. It is becoming more probable that it won't. On the possibility of moving the market to the edge of the site, the RBA review is equivocal. Again, it might be possible to relocate the market building on the broader site. However, it is clear in the review that this is a very low priority, considerably lower than preserving the significant attributes of the market in place. This solution is freeing up the site for more intense development, would not be supported by the wider community and should not be considered until Council does the work on preparing and presenting a heritage overlay. A conservation management plan, a structural analysis and a master plan is recommended in the report conclusion.
Mr Erlandson, thank you. That's 2 minutes. Actually, it's a little more than 2 minutes because we started the clock late. So thank you for the submission. Please pass on our thanks to Ms Paletti for the time she's obviously taken to prepare that.
Okay. I'll read mine out now.
Thank you.
At its inaugural committee meeting in 2015 of the Save Our Preston Market group, the developer posed the question, what is it that you want to save? For us, it was a question that says more about a certain mentality that our members disagreed with and opposed. We have been opposing that for 5 years now. We are committed and motivated by altruism and do not take issues personally. We are fighting for a higher purpose, and that is for the betterment of the community. Save Our Preston Market, through its ever-growing numbers, continues to push for maximum protection of the now 4 main heritage elements, that is, the social and cultural, technical and aesthetic aspects, having been identified through the Heritage Victoria hearing and now recognised in the latest RBA Heritage Report. To us, however, there seems to be a pervasive desire for Council to be not fully and genuinely representing the community interest. An example of this is how our Save Our Preston Market message got subverted from saving the market to saving a market, which then presented Council and the VPA to introduce the notion of relocating the market. Had the findings from both Heritage Victoria and the RBA report been available before the community reference group meetings were conducted, Heritage would arguably have been on the table for discussion.
10 seconds.
So what we're saying is that there has been some unfair bias, and we continue to see decisions made that are based on the full facts, yet allow misinformation to creep into discussion and ultimately into written reports.
Thank you, Mr Erlandson. Thank you very much to both yourself and Ms Paletti for the time you've taken to consider the reports. Councillors, I'll now ask if anyone has any questions in relation to the matter before us tonight. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The first question that I have is that I note that there are 2 reports associated with this particular item. One report is the Heritage Report, and the other report is an Urban Design Report. In reading both of these reports, it appears to me that the 2 reports were written independently of each other without taking into account the issue, which is the central issue of the market's local social significance. As a result of that, it appears to me in the report, the design report, that options are being considered which completely offend the local heritage value of the market.
Greco, what's the question?
The question is that whether these 2 reports that were commissioned, whether the authors of the reports, particularly the Urban Design Report, were cognizant of the local heritage, the confirmed local heritage significance of the market.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Greco. Over to you.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. The Urban Design Report was commissioned before the Heritage Report, and it's quite normal in a planning context for each expert to consider the particular matter of its expertise. So the Heritage Report would consider heritage matters, and the Urban Design Report would consider urban design matters, and then as is typical in a planning context, then the planners would have to understand and balance the differing recommendations of those reports in light of each other.
Thank you. Councillors, further questions?
Just a supplementary question to that. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to commission the Urban Design Report after the heritage, local heritage significance report was obtained?
Thank you, Ms Hayes.
again through you, Mayor Rennie, we've commissioned numerous studies on numerous matters in relation to Preston Market. So some heritage work was commissioned before the urban design work was commissioned. But we would typically, in this project, commission work as soon as we knew that it needed to be done and as soon as council resolved for us to do it. But the numerous heritage reports that had already been commissioned, plus some of the findings from the Heritage Council of Victoria, plus the identity study, were all available to the urban designers when they carried out their work. And our assessment is that there's nothing in the urban design report that would preclude or negate anything in the heritage report. It's just that both of those recommendations would have to be looked at together.
Thank you. Councillors, are there further questions? Councillor Greco?
Just a further question. Just in relation to the reports that we have received, will the Roots Partnership report regarding the construction be released by Council? Also, will the report from the Office of the Victorian Government Architect from August 2019, would that be released? And are there any other reports that refer to the market viability, will they be released?
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Greco. Ms Hayes?
Through you, Mayor Rennie, there was no formally commissioned report from Root Partnerships. We just got some informal advice from them based on their visual assessment of the buildings and also their assessment of some information that was confidential. So that obviously can't be shared. In relation to the Office of the Victorian Government Architect, they looked at 3 different scenarios at the time, 2 of which have not been continued in any form. We did share some general findings from them with councillors, but as they were reporting on, again, on confidential matters, it was a report that they had asked to be kept confidential. We haven't been able to share that more broadly. We have gone back to them and asked if we could share it in full with councillors, but they have not as yet responded.
Thank you. Councillors, are there further questions? There are none. I'll call for a motion. Councillor Greco?
Mayor, I have an alternate motion that I circulated this afternoon.
Thank you, and I think all councillors should have a copy of that on the table. As that's not the prepared motion or the recommended motion, I'll again open the opportunity up for councillors to ask any questions. Yeah, I've got a seconder. Councillor Williams has seconded that. Thank you, I noted. Are there any questions in relation to the motion that has been proposed by Councillor Greco? Councillor Messina.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, I note in Councillor Greco's motion, amendment, there's some discussion here about some maintenance issues in terms of redesigning, removing paint, also looking at light fittings. Are they part of a motion that, can we actually imply that with a developer? Can we enforce that with a developer?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Messina. Ms Myers.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. So the information in Councillor Greco's motion refers to information in the Statement of Significance, and that's describing how the current building is significant and what parts of it are significant. And in a Statement of Significance, it tends to look to, particularly where a heritage building has been changed over time, often talks about preferred changes to the building are that you reinstate it to its original condition. However, that is just the Statement of Significance that goes alongside the heritage overlay. So any future development application would have to be assessed against that, and we could certainly advocate for it.
Thank you. Are there further questions? No. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, Councillor, it's quite a lengthy motion, also because the motion that we did receive was lengthy in itself. Look, the motion that I'm putting forward tonight is actually a motion to reinforce our position in regards to ensuring that the market does not get demolished and ensuring that the market does not get relocated on the basis of the statement of significance in regards to what needs to be protected in regards to the Preston Market. The report that refers to the heritage significance categorically states that the market has been confirmed to have heritage significance, both social, technical, and also many other aspects of significance. The other point that needs to be made is that we actually need to be very, very clear with the VPA in regards to the representations and advocacy that we make to them. We need to say that the market, on the basis of the statement of significance, is that the market needs to be protected. That is, the footprint of the market, where it is, needs to be protected, and we should not allow the VPA or the Minister to entertain the idea of moving the market elsewhere, which will then damage the heritage significance of the market. It was also pointed out in this motion is that I think numerous other reports need to be commissioned by Council in order to ensure that Council has direct input in regards to those reports. That is a master plan, something that we have been calling for many years, and also a report in regards to the ensuring that the market, if there are changes, that there is a management plan in relation to the market. The other point that this motion makes a point of, and as part of my question here tonight, was that I think we need to dismiss the urban design report, because the urban design report was written without knowledge of the statement of significance in regards to the market. So the option that the urban design report has recommended actually totally offends the point about the significance of the market, because it proposes to move the market to the street on Gower Street, which is completely contrary to what is actually trying to be preserved here, and that is the existing footprint of the market. So I urge councillors, in the 5 seconds that I have now, this is crucial. This is important. This shows our intent that we do not want the market to be demolished or relocated.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Williams.
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. Are there further speakers to the motion? Councillor Amir.
That's all right, you go.
I called you, so Councillor Amir.
Thanks, Mayor Rennie. There's absolutely, no doubt as to the significance of the market, both from a heritage perspective, but more importantly from a social and community perspective. And as Councillor Greco has mentioned, this is a long motion to match the long motion we originally had in the report. So I will get straight to the crux of the issue, which is around the location of Preston Market. And we have heard loud and clear from the Save Our Preston Market group over the last 3.5 years here on council that is their perspective. That is what they feel very passionately, strongly about. Absolutely have heard loud and clear from that discussion on their Facebook page, from the submissions made here in the council chamber, from the many conversations that we've had over the last 3 years. However, what we have in the original report alluded to, but it isn't fully captured, is 3.5 years of much, much broader community consultation, from talking to people at the market, from talking to people across Darebin, from talking to traders, from talking to people who live in the surrounding areas, and the views from the community are not so consistent. What I hear from residents in my ward, in Kazaley Ward, as a ward councillor, are some of the issues that we've heard raised here in the council chambers tonight around the desperate need for green open space in central Preston, around the need to support local businesses, including the traders at the market, around the need for community services. And that is not all possible with what we have that may or may not be possible with keeping the market where it is. So it is a balance of competing needs. The proposed report does not advocate against keeping the market in its place, and at this stage I want to keep all options open so that we can reflect the view of the full community.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Councillor Messina.
I'm happy to support Councillor Greco's motion. I want to thank the community who undertook the journey with the advocacy and the extensive work that has been carried out by the officers. The major reason for me to nominate council was to give energy and strength to Preston Central. Save the market, that means keeping the traders and save the footprint and keep the position of the footprint, no demolishment of the market. This isn't about a group on Facebook. This is about the community, this is about the market, this is about the traders, not a Facebook group. I want to thank the fellow councillors who supported me with the inclusion of Preston Central, the upgrade in the budget and in the council plan, and our major advocacy work that's been undertaken. We know the Preston Market is not only the heart of Preston, she's perfectly positioned as a multicultural connection, part of the north and the south and the east and the west. When the journey began 4 years ago, she has evolved, and she's significantly different and is vibrant and evolving. What I know people want is to save the footprint of the market, not to demolish it, to save the traders, keep the heartbeat pounding, do not move the position of the market and do not move the market itself. A successful Preston Market is to ensure that any development must ensure to keep its core spatial characters the market remain, clear hierarchy of the street and the open spaces, activation between the station and High Street, no blank walls, no concrete jungle, and supporting the traders to ensure the vibrancy mix of the different diverse backgrounds are also supported. We need to create a sustainable and vibrant neighbourhood involving the migrant communities, and no car parking on the ground level, underground parking also. This is what the community have asked for, and this is what I'm supporting.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there further speakers? Councillor Newton.
Just briefly, I'll be speaking in opposition to this motion as it stands. What I want to see is a market that thrives into the future. We've spent a hell of a lot of time hearing about this, speaking to the community about this, getting the advice of experts on this, and what we see from the report is that there is no one thing that we could say, or the VPA would say, or Save Our Preston Market would say that would allow for that perfect future for the market. So we've got all of these contradicting things about what might be best. And I can't support Councillor Greco's motion because we have so much different advice in here, including that it's quite possible that the market, if it stays in the same spot, it might have tall buildings around it. It's possible that the market might have to close if we, actually I don't want to say that. But I think that I can't support it because I think there's so much going on here and we have to look at all the options.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. Are there further speakers? Councillor Williams.
This is my second term as a councillor, and there's been no doubt that the Preston Market has brought many debates here in this chamber amongst us councillors and the community, especially on issues regarding the car parking and obviously planning applications for multiple towers. The Preston Market is a unique, iconic site that sits on 2 acres of land. This year, the market is celebrating 50 years, which is a significant milestone that we should all be proud of and should stay intact for at least another 50 years. It's important that council work collectively together with the developer and the community in which will enrich Darebin and the many benefits to ensure the greater outcome for this community. There would be at least 100 different combinations where the market could or should be placed. But such recommendations is incorrect, and we actually should be sticking to the facts, like what the market means to the community, employment, social aspects and the heritage component attached to the market, and what is needed to better ensuring the maximum protection of the market. I would like to see the developer and council hold off until the new Preston station is built, in which will impact the market as the station is located right at its doorstep. Relocating the market can have detrimental long-term effects of the life of the market.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak in relation to this item, but I'm struck by some points made in the debate which I think need to be clarified. I can't support Councillor Greco's lengthy pages of amendments for two reasons. One is we received this very late in the day and it's extensive, and I appreciate the work that goes into trying to amend what is a very long motion, but there are some contradictions in there. I won't go through them line by line, but one of them goes to the core of this issue, which is that there is no question that there is unanimous support on this council, as evidenced by the October 2019 motion through this council, which is that we have sought directly to the Minister for an interim heritage overlay. We have also sought for permanent controls based on the evidence. We now have the evidence. And we need to remember that in order to achieve the local heritage overlay status that has been spoken about so frequently in this chamber and in other forums, we actually need an evidence base that is robust, that cannot simply be put to the side by not just the Minister, but all the people that advise the Minister and the lobbyists and the developer and anyone else who has a stake in this. So when it comes to the question about heritage, in order to pursue that argument that we committed to in October 2019, that would be part of our case, we need to go there with eyes wide open. One of the things that I'm concerned about with Councillor Greco's amendments is actually that it contradicts itself several times. If we are seeking to achieve the green open space dividend that this site should deliver to the community at large, then we need to not go down the path of saying that the market can only be in that location where it currently is, but could in fact be larger
10 seconds.
And could be protected in a way that actually also delivers that green open space on site, which I think our community desperately wants to see as well.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? No. Councillor Greco, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, just answer to a few of the questions that were raised. This is not just Data's perspective. This is actually the community's view of saving the market where it is. This is what we're talking about, councillors. We don't want bulldozers to be knocking down the market for the sake of moving the market to another location. In terms of evidence base, we have the evidence now, councillors. We have a heritage study, a statement of significance that talks about the fabric of the market and talks about maintaining the market where it is, and talks about also, furthermore, reinstating some of the things that have been removed from the market in order to bring it back to its original state. The other point that needs to be said is that we cannot let the community down, because we are at a very, very important point here, councillors. If this motion does not get up, we are signalling to the community, to the state government, to the VPA, that the site there is an open slather. Put the market wherever you want to put it, and not save the existing footprint of the market that we have there, that has been determined by heritage studies to be of local social significance. So, councillors, the question is, what is more important here? The key issue here, councillors, is preserving the market where it is. Other issues, councillors, urban design and other issues, have to fit in with that objective. That is the key objective, and we need to be as strong as possible on that particular point.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour?
Voting for this particular motion, I just want to clarify that, yep.
Yeah, the motion in front of us, yes. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour and against? That motion is lost. We'll note that Councillors Messina, Williams and Greco voted in favour, and Councillors Lesurf, McCarthy, Newton, Amir and Rennie voted against. Councillors, is there another motion? Councillor Amir.
I'm happy to move the motion as listed in the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Amir.
Thanks, Mayor Rennie. Now, this is quite a substantial motion, so before I get into the details of the criteria, I just wanted to quickly outline what we've got here. So we're tabling the Preston Market Options Review, the Preston Market Heritage Review, adopting the Preston Market Heritage criteria, and writing to the VPA requesting the strongest protections to the site. And again, it has been mentioned many times, I will mention it again and again, Council does not own this site. It's a privately owned site, so we do not have control over what happens to the site. We can merely advocate in the strongest way possible, and that is what we're doing now. So we're writing to the VPA as per this recommendation, if it gets up, applying for a permanent heritage overlay to the market, and requesting support for Council's request to the Planning Minister to apply an interim heritage overlay. So it's certainly not open slather, as was mentioned previously. Also requesting the development of a conservation management plan and to release the draft framework plan publicly. Finally, well, among other things, there's quite a lot in there, but the real crux of what we have here is around the options for the site and updating the criteria to assess the redevelopment options. So looking at this criteria, the first thing that strikes me is just how far we've come in the last 3.5 years. And I think back to December 2016 when we had a community meeting about the view for the market, and it was very adversarial, was very polarised, and I feel like what we've got here in the criteria listed today, of course, there will be members of the community who believe it doesn't go far enough. There'll be members of the community and traders potentially who thinks that it's too prescriptive, but it is the product of 3.5 years of hard work and bringing together that diversity of views to make a statement about what it means to protect the market. And when we talk to people about, well, when I talk to people about what they love about the market, they're often talking in feelings. I love the multicultural vibe. I love the energy. I love how it feels local. I love how I run into my friends there. And what we've got here is a list that takes those feelings, takes that love, takes that vibe and puts it into something that can be applied. And what is so exciting about what we've got here is that it goes so far beyond what we've got already at the market. So it includes community services, health services, green open space, affordable housing for new migrants and others, intercultural programs, food programs, language, art, tree canopy, and an increased prominence for the market. Not will we have it, not will we have it now hidden behind the buildings and with the risk of overshadowing. Just last week, we had a planning committee meeting and council rejected the proposal from the developer to go ahead with the 3 towers that were planned at the back of the site. We want the best outcome for the whole site. We don't own it. We are advocating very strongly for this community vision that I hope can be supported.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Councillor McCarthy.
I'll reserve my right, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Mayor, I have an amendment that I would like to suggest.
Yes.
And the amendment is, I'll read it out, that at under Objective 3, Roman numeral number 3.
Hang on, at Objective 3 there's no 1 and 2, so I don't know how I can have a 3. Oh, sorry. So are you not referring to something that's actually, Councillor Greco, can I just seek clarification?
Yeah, I'll find the right one, yep. It's Objective 3 on page 105, Roman numeral number 3.
Yes.
Yeah, and my amendment is to remove that point there and replace it with the following point, that provide a variety of building heights to a mandatory maximum of 10 stories, including podium, in brackets, currently a non-mandatory 10-storey height limit applies, close bracket, and generous setbacks with a 30-degree gradient outwards from the market's 10-metre curtilage footprint under the heritage overlay conditions stipulated in the statement of significance and then followed on, comma, with world-class architecture and urban design.
Thank you. So that is effectively, as I read it, your existing C3. I'll just seek advice because effectively those words have been, Stephen, before you go, I'll seek advice because those words have effectively actually been debated and voted down as part of the last motion. So I'll have to seek advice as to whether it effectively actually returns us to a debate we've just had. So, Mr Mann, those words are part of the motion that Council just voted down. Can Councillor Greco move them as an amendment?
Through Mayor Rennie, having just seen them and understanding what's happened, I would think not, that's been dealt with and lost as part of that previous motion.
Thank you, Councillor
Just a
Greco.
point of clarification. It's just one item of the previous motion that was considered. So I don't believe that the advice and the ruling that you're about to give is correct.
I tend to agree, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Messina, it doesn't matter whether you agree. I've received governance advice. I am inclined to agree with the governance advice that we actually have debated that as part of the motion that's been debated, and therefore I'm going to disallow that amendment.
Through you, Mayor, what if one councillor did want to agree to some of those amendments, just one line, not the whole thing? I mean, I find that's not right.
I'm sorry, councillors, but the governance local law, is in place for a reason, and I've sought and received governance advice for a reason. I would suggest that if Councillor Greco was interested or had been interested in working out whether some of this would be supported and not other parts, that was work he could have done all through today. And in fact, I note that many councillors who have complex changes they want to achieve spend the hours, if not days, actually working with their colleagues to work out what might be supported and what might not be supported, and that's the process. So, Councillor Messina, that is what my ruling is. Councillor Messina, I've sought advice. We've now got a new governance local law. So I'm sorry, Councillor Greco, I have to disallow the amendment.
Mayor, I want to move a motion of dissent of your decision to disallow my amendment.
Councillor Greco, I don't believe that in the governance local law there is any provision to dissent from the Mayor's ruling in a matter such as this. You can dissent on a point of order, but you can't dissent in relation to this ruling. I'll seek clarification once again and refer you to...
From the direction that you are giving, in not allowing this matter to be considered.
Councillor Greco, I will refer to the governance local law. I want to make sure that I am compliant with that governance local law. I will seek advice, but that's my understanding, and if I'm wrong, I will stand corrected. Can you refer me to the clause?
Through you, Mayor Rennie, clause in section 12, clause 57, dissent from a chairperson's ruling. And this is consistent with the previous local law. A councillor may move a motion of dissent in the chairperson's ruling on a point of order without speaking to it. So there's no provision for a dissent on other matters.
Thank you. Councillor Greco, I'm not ignoring your wish to move a dissent, or I'm just saying it's inconsistent with the governance local law. So I suggest that we keep moving. We've heard from the mover, the seconder reserved his right. Councillors, are there any further speakers? Councillor Greco.
Mayor, I would like to move another motion, another amendment.
Certainly.
Yeah, and the amendment that I will move is that Council communicates to the VPA that that Preston Market ought to be protected, and that the statement of significance needs to be adhered to in order to protect, in order to ensure the market is not demolished or relocated.
I've had a go at catching the first part, but I didn't catch the second part. Mr. Mann?
Got it.
Yeah, Ms Wilkinson's got it, so... Ms Wilkinson, for the sake of clarity and getting that up on the screen, could you read it out?
Lisa, you're right. So I'm not sure where. I don't think Councillor Greco said where he would put that, but and it will be a new point that council communicates to the VPA that Preston Market ought to be protected and that the statement of significance needs to be adhered to.
Need to ensure
I haven't.
the market is not demolished.
Yeah, no, I haven't finished. Sorry. Adhered to in order to ensure that Preston Market is not demolished or relocated.
So, Councillor Messina, I'm guessing you want a second, but the process is that I'll first ask the mover and the seconder if they accept that. So we'll get that up on the screen.
It's a new point 9.
So, Councillor Amir.
Could I just correct what is up there?
Yep.
Rennie?
Just say it nice and slowly and loudly if you don't think that's correct.
Council rights to the VPA.
Rights to the VPA, yep.
And the Minister.
Minister for Planning.
Stating that.
The Minister for Planning.
Minister for Planning, it's assumed, yep. Stating that. Stating that the Preston Market must, not ought, must protected from demolition or relocation and or relocation. In view of the statement of significance relating to the confirmed local heritage value of the market. Full stop. And I just remove the word or, when it says and or, just remove the word
just
or.
Can we let them get that down before we confuse them with other instructions? Now, Councillor
Put that as point number 1 in the resolution, and everything else can be numbered below that.
Okay, so Councillor Greco, Thank you. That's now captured. I'll seek, I'll ask the mover and seconder whether they accept that. No, that's not acceptable to the mover and seconder. I'll therefore ask if there's a seconder for Councillor Greco's. Councillor Messina has seconded your amendment. So we'll now debate the amendment. Councillor Greco, you may begin the debate on the amendment.
Councillors, I can't stress how important it is that we send a, that we make the decision here in Council at this pointy end of the saga in relation to the market and its future, and clearly communicate the wishes of the Council, which I believe strongly reflect the sentiment of the community in saving the market where it is, saving the market from any potential demolition for the sake of moving the market to a more convenient, supposedly a more convenient spot on the site to allow more intense development on the overall site, which is the Preston Market site. Councillors, this is the crucial point. These 4 or 5 years that we've been battling about the market is to save the footprint of the market. Councillors, yes, we've gone a long way, but you know where we've ended up? We've ended up to a similar position of the developers, because at the outset, the developers wanted the market to be moved. And what councillors tonight are indicating to me, and I think to the community, that they are on the same page, on the same drawing page of the developers, because councillors are happy to consent and entertain the idea of moving the market, which has been confirmed as an historical site, local historical site, to another place. My question is, councillors, we love the market. We think it has wonderful aspects about it, multicultural. We all talk about these things. And the best way to conserve that, councillors, is to conserve the fabric of the market, because those things exist not in abstract. Those things exist because of the fabric and the footprint of the market. So if we allow and entertain the idea of allowing the market to be demolished, to be moved somewhere else, we are threatening the 50 years of service and economic lifeblood that this market has provided to our city. And without mentioning the social significance that the market has had for many generations and could have for more generations into the future.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Messina.
I reserve my right.
Yep.
Are there any further speakers to this amendment? Councillor Amir.
I wasn't going to speak to this because we have already discussed this issue, but I do want to speak to the point about councillors being on the same side as developers. I'll be pretty blunt. They hate us. If you've ever been in a meeting with SALTA, the amount of anger, frustration, antagonism that has been directed to, there's of course some collaboration in that we all want the market to continue. But the amount of vitriol that our officers have faced is evidence of the extent to which we are not at all on the same side. And the planning meeting a week ago is such clear evidence of that in the way the representatives spoke about the site was at such odds with the vision that we have for the market site. So what we're asking for here is we're asking for kindergartens, we're asking for health services, we're asking for trees, we're asking for green open space, we're asking for housing for refugees. The developers of the market don't care about any of those things. What they care about is the market continuing, and that is the place where we agree. The developers, the community, and all the councillors here today. But we need to fight for what we want, which is a site for the whole community, for everyone, with what the community wants. I'm not going to be fighting for a big car park, and I am being clear about that. We want to have something better, and so I think to lump us in together with people at such odds is a vast misrepresentation of what's going on, and is very, I'd say perhaps unimaginative, because we are hoping for something that is so much better to reach the full potential of what the market can be. And a big sea of cars really isn't that.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. Are there any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Williams.
Look, we've had obviously many discussions regarding this. Moving the market would be absolutely a huge detrimental to the market. We can have open space. It's called airspace that we can build on. We can also have multi-level car parking. There are smart ways about doing things on this site, but I don't think it's our place to actually tell developers or anybody where the market should be relocated to, whether it's this side of the road or that side of the road. We should actually be working together and involving the community, developers and council, and working at it together. I think we're not working in harmony here, and I think this is where our greatest fall is, and it would be nice to actually see some better outcomes. I just don't think this is the best way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers to Councillor Greco's amendment? Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. I really liked what Councillor Williams had to say just then, and it strikes me, though, that it might be actually the strongest reason to not support Councillor Greco's amendment. Councillor Williams just made the point to say we need to not be saying where the market should be relocated or whether the market should be relocated. And I think it's a really important point because, in fact, that's exactly what the substantive motion is all about, not seeking to prescribe what the footprint should be of the market. Because that's actually the critical issue that Councillor Greco is seeking to make this debate about by this amendment. But it's not the critical issue. The critical issue here is to provide a position that is going to get over the line. That is the challenge, councillors, that is before us, is to put something forward that is compelling, cohesive, that does not create a situation where we are completely diametrically opposed to the position that the Minister will be willing to consider. I would just remind councillors that the decision about the future relocation and configuration, size, scope, scale of Preston Market does not sit in the hands of this council. That changed when council ceased to be the responsible authority, and in fact it was community calls for the Minister to take up those powers. The Minister did that, and the moment that happened, we became an advocate and an influencer in this situation, not the responsible authority, not the decision maker. So the purpose of this motion is to provide the most up-to-date position to advocate to the VPA, which is the representative agent of the Minister in this regard. If we cannot convince the VPA to take heritage with significance in this case, then we have lost the debate. So, councillors, let's get serious. We want to win the fight to save Preston Market.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there further speakers? Councillor Masseni, you reserved your right.
Thank you. I think I'm a fair councillor, and I think I have to agree with Councillor Amir. Greco's statements about saying that the council was in with the developers is actually not correct. So I need to correct that. We have been fighting for the Preston Market, but here is where my vision changes. I do not want, and the community do not want, the relocation of the existing footprint. Simple as that. Who says that we can't keep the market where it is and attend to the kindergarten? Who says that we can't keep the market where it is and have the green open spaces? Who says that we can't keep the market where it is and have X, X and Y as listed on our report? Who says you can't? Because I think we can. I don't want to be walking down the street with my grandson, who is new, and saying, that's where I used to work. That's where the market used to be. But now it's this big, huge market that looks like a shopping centre, or is it a market? I don't know, but that's what I don't want. And I think that's not what the community wants. So please do not make false statements about council being in with the developers, because they are not in with the developers. We just don't agree on certain things, and they have a right to not agree. I've spoken to the community, and I've made it my mission to speak to them. And the most important thing is, do not move the market. That's what they tell us. Because when the moment you move it, you move the people with it, and it no longer has the significant or the cultural, social aspect of the market. That's what the huge issue is, not moving it and making false statements about being in bed with developers.
Thank you, Councillor Messina. Are there any further speakers to the amendment? No, I'll put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? And against? That was Councillors Messina and Greco in favour, and Councillors... Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Mayor Rennie, I have a second amendment.
Councillor Greco, I haven't called the vote yet, so if you could sit down, please. Okay. Can I hold that vote again, because the hands weren't clear the first time? All those in favour of the amendment? And against? That was Councillors Messina, Williams and Greco in favour, and Councillors McCarthy, Lassurf, Newton, Amir and Rennie against. Thank you. Councillor Greco.
Mayor Rennie, I have a second amendment that I'd like to propose.
Yes.
And that second amendment is at Objective 3, Roman numeral number 3, and it reads as follows. Provide a variety of building heights to a mandatory maximum of 12 stories, including podium, brackets, currently a non-mandatory 10-storey limit applies, close brackets, and generous setbacks with a 30-degree gradient outwards from the market's 10-metre curtilage footprint under the heritage overlay conditions stipulated in the Statement of Significance, with world-class architecture and urban design.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. I'll just seek advice, because that is actually as per before, but with changing 10 stories to 12 stories. Mr. Mann.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, I'd have to see the amendment, but if it changes the words...
Exactly this, but changing 10 to 12.
Right. It'd be my view that it could be accepted and debated as an amendment.
Okay, thank you for that advice. Councillor Greco, I'll accept that, assuming that it makes it through the next hurdle, which is it acceptable to the mover and seconder? So that was Councillor Amir.
Can we ask a question?
Yes.
So my question is the extent to which that's consistent with the current restrictions of that site.
Thank you. Ms Myers.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. If you're talking about the current conditions of the planning scheme, it's a discretionary 10 stories.
Yes.
Through you, Mayor Rennie, can we get advice on the success of similar attempts, either by this council or others, to set mandatory height limits where it's currently discretionary?
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Rennie. Generally, the use of mandatory height controls needs to be based on a significant amount of urban design modelling and evidence relating to the impacts of that height on things like overshadowing parks or the southern footpath. So there's often very specific reasons why mandatory heights, as opposed to discretionary heights, need to be put in place. And certainly that could be appropriate on some sections of this site, particularly the southern edge, where height could overshadow Preston Oval, but it may not be successful for other parts of the site.
Okay, councillors, is it acceptable to the seconder and the mover?
I'll just ask another question, sorry.
It'd be good if the questions could be yes or no questions. I'm trying to avoid a situation where the officers are effectively...
It's a simple yes or no question. In the documentation that Council has before it, is there sufficient evidence to supporting a compelling case to support the proposed amendment as it is currently written?
I think that actually asks for for the officers to enter debate, because you're asking for an opinion. So I'm actually going to suggest, Ms Wilkinson, just...
So I feel like that question's not appropriate, Councillor McCarthy. We have a proposed amendment on the floor. We don't have a seconder yet. I really would like councillors to resist questions that might cause officers to inadvertently find themselves in the middle of the debate.
Noted with thanks. It was probably more that it's a very specific technical amendment and it's not something that has been fashioned in the debate at this point. So I'm happy to withdraw the question.
I would suggest if councillors have questions of this nature, sometimes the debate is the best way also, so you could not accept it and then we could seek a second and it could be debated. But can I just confirm, do you or do you not accept the amendment?
I don't accept it.
Thank you. Councillor Messina.
Before I second the motion, can I just correct that item number C5 is not what Councillor Greco read out, so that's already up on the board. So I just want some clarification.
So it's the three item
okay, the three that's highlighted. I'm happy to second that.
Highlighted.
I'm happy to second that, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
The other stuff's not in it.
I was just confirming that, but it's on the wall. It's on the wall.
Okay. So it's the highlighted part is the amendment. We'll now enter debate on this amendment. Councillor Greco.
Thank you, Mayor. It's really disappointing to see that the councillors are not willing to embrace this common sense amendment, because by not embracing...
It's a point of order. I find that offensive given that we haven't voted on it yet. I didn't indicate my view at all.
I'm just pointing out that...
So I've got a point of order. Okay. The point of order that's been raised is that Councillor Amir finds it offensive to suggest the attitude of councillors when that hasn't been voted on. Councillor Greco, I'm just simply going to ask that you refrain from suggesting what the attitude of anyone might be to a motion that hasn't yet been voted on.
Not a problem, Mayor Rennie. At the moment, the way the objectives read, that buildings of any height can be considered for that site. We have already seen previous plans of the developer where they were proposing 27, 28 stories on that particular site. So for this council not to impose or suggest, at least to the VPA and to the Minister, that there should be mandatory heights over that particular site, I think is completely irresponsible on the part of council if we do not go down that path. Mandatory heights, I believe, suit that particular site. And why it suits that particular site is because we have a market footprint, and we're not only talking about heights, we're also talking about a 30% gradient to avoid overshadowing of a market, which part of its heritage value is the fact that it's an open air market. So if you have buildings over that site that go beyond a certain height, you are going to completely offend the heritage significance of the market. The other point that I think needs to be made is that it's a big site. We have a very aggressive developer, and he has already demonstrated that, and councillors have alluded to that, is that if we don't place tighter controls over that site, again, it's open slather for the developer to try and put as many stories to make that site with buildings with as many heights, with the highest heights as possible. So it's incumbent on us, councillors. We do this in relation to other areas of our city where we place in our planning scheme mandatory heights. Why can't we do it in relation to the Preston Market site, which is one of the most important sites in our city? If we don't do it there, councillors, we are actually not doing our jobs as councillors in protecting both the site and protecting the footprint of the market.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Messina.
I reserve my right.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers to this amendment? Councillor Williams.
I'm not sure exactly when we changed mandatory heights. I think it was some years ago and I wasn't here, I was actually on a holiday. But in my previous time being on council, we spent years and years ensuring what that mandatory height would look like. The reason being is that everything that we build or anything that is built has a mandatory height. We all have conditions and controls. And one of them that I believe that we had in this situation was what was considered a maximum of what could be built at that particular site. And for some reason, it's gone from, it was an amendment from, as my fellow councillor mentioned, 27 stories, and it came down to 12 stories. And now it seems to be not in the policy at all. So now we're fighting back to square one, like we've done the full circle. So I'm quite baffled about that one. So I can't see why not that we go back a step and we ensure that there is some sort of protection of what is actually built there. As my fellow councillor Greco has already mentioned, it is an open market and overshadowing will impact the market and what is considered an open market to look like and actually be like.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy.
I can't support Councillor Greco's amendment because in Council's own documentation, we are not talking about allowing for all buildings on site to be at 12 stories. That's not the path that Council's research, Council's evidence base goes down. In fact, I would draw to Councillors' attention the Preston Market quarter identity study, which not a perfect document, no document is, but it talks about a whole range of building heights based on what the proposed controls could be. It's not a mass scale 12-storey arrangement, which I'm deeply concerned that Councillor Greco's amendment will deliver, even with a 30% gradient. We know, and I would just draw Councillors' attention back to the decisions of this planning minister in the past who has not supported a mandatory 30% gradient. The minister has not supported mandatory heights in the way that Councillor Williams described. The minister has in fact gone in and backed in discretionary height limits. We have advocated for mandatory height limits in this chamber with limited success. What we have here is actually a choice about whether you want to go down the path of trying to pick a number and hope that it gets over the line, or instead talking about a set of principles that will ensure that you do not see buildings of 12 stories, but in fact you see buildings of far more modest heights. That's what the principles that we have developed in this council and the evidence we have support, is not to deliver the maximum mandatory height of 12 stories across a whole range of the site.
I think Councillor McCarthy is misrepresenting what's in the motion.
So you're making a point of order that...
Point of order. My motion talks about provide a variety of building heights to a mandatory maximum of 10 stories, not a maximum of... not a maximum of 12.
Councillor Greco, you don't get to enter the debate. You get to make a point of order. So your point of order is that there's been a misrepresentation. I am going to rule against that on the grounds that I don't think Councillor McCarthy has indicated. I don't think there's been any misrepresentation.
May further a point of order. Councillor McCarthy said that my amendment was going to put in place mandatory heights of 12 stories. It does not say that.
Councillor
Councillor
Greco,
McCarthy needs to withdraw that statement and continue on with what else he had to say.
Councillor Greco, that's not the statement I heard from Councillor McCarthy. I've ruled against your point of order. Councillor McCarthy, you can keep going.
Thank you. I think I only had 5 seconds or 10 seconds left, Mayor, but I'll just close in saying that to be as prescriptive as to talk about allowing up to 12 stories actually delivers the development dividend that I think is inconsistent with what the design principles are.
Thank you. We've heard from Councillor Greco, Councillor Williams and Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Messina, you reserved your right. Are there further speakers? No. Councillor Lassurf. Yeah, Councillor Lassurf.
Sorry. You're behind me. I couldn't see you. Sorry, I don't have eyes at the back of my head.
I guess I just wanted to provide an extension to Councillor McCarthy's comments. The motion in itself draws our attention to MGS Architects' options review and to note the findings and to, I guess, point out some of the urban design principles within that report. Now, that report shows that there is a range of different heights available across the market that would start at a very low level at Kramer Street at 2 and slowly go up in terms of making sure that the overshadowing and the space between the buildings is optimised. Under the current proposal by Councillor Greco, I don't think that we would probably see some of these urban design considerations built into the planning controls around the maximum, around the height limits. And so I think there's some inconsistency in terms of what we're trying to achieve in terms of urban design versus putting a mandatory maximum height limit that could be applied across the site. And I think that that's what Councillor McCarthy was trying to say.
Thank you, Councillor Lassurf. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Messina, you reserved your right. Do you wish to speak?
I think I've said all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you. I'll now put that to the vote. We're voting on the amendment. There's no right of reply on an amendment. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? That amendment is lost, with Councillors Messina, Williams and Greco voting in favour and Councillors McCarthy, Lassurf, Newton, Amir and Rennie voting against. We'll now return to debate on the motion. We had heard from the mover and the seconder.
I've not spoken to them.
You have not spoken.
No, you reserved your right. Sorry, Councillor McCarthy.
Okay, thank you. Are there further speakers on the motion? We'll just make sure we can get that amendment off the screen that's been lost. So I'll go back.
So you've got Councillor Amir and Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Amir has spoken. Councillor McCarthy reserved. No other councillors have spoken.
Okay. Councillors, are there further speakers on the substantive motion? Councillor Greco.
Mayor, I'll be voting against the substantive motion. I've tried to bring into this meeting, I think, some common sense approach in terms of defending the footprint of the market and defending the integrity of the market and defending the social significance and heritage value of the market, which has been confirmed by the heritage report. The motion that we have before us does not do that. It refers to all these reports, but it does not satisfactorily, in my view, and I think my view will be shared by lots of people in the community, of retaining the market where it is. What this motion does, it allows any buildings of any heights to be considered for that site. It allows for the market to be demolished, and if this motion goes through tonight, we may see in the near future bulldozers knocking down the market. It also allows for the market to be relocated and a whole number of other things. Councillors also talked about how we are asking for many things in relation to this site. And I agree with a lot of those things that we are asking, and I incorporated them in my original motion. But the fundamental point, the fundamental thing that we're not requesting and not demanding is that the market stays where it is. We can demand all those other things, but all those other things will cease to really have their true value if we don't keep the market where it is. And the final point is yes, this council, if it votes for this motion, would have done a flip in relation to siding, I believe, with the same desires that the developer has, that is, of bulldozing that market and then building some substitute market in another corner of that site.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Are there any further speakers? Councillor McCarthy, you reserved your right.
Thanks, Mayor. It's been an interesting debate. I'm going to try to put aside all the aspersions around councillors' character, what this all means, because I think they just muddy what is actually a pretty clear question for council, which is, do we want to put forward a proposition that can get over the line? Do we want to succeed in advancing those key principles that are outlined in the report, including the protection of the heritage of the market, including the provision of social and affordable housing? And we have evidence and we have reports and we have an evidence base in a broad sense that supports those things. Do we want to see the provision of new green open space at the market? Do we want to turn that site into something which in fact delivers better outcomes on safety, better outcomes in terms of community facilities, a stronger, more robust economic environment to support the current and future traders there? Do we actually ensure that we see the retention of that rich multicultural flavour that the market is known for and loved for, and which the Heart of Preston puts forward? Do we want to be able to put forward a case that in fact can be endorsed in its entirety by the Planning Minister, by the VPA, and not heavily resisted by the developer? I suspect we'll still face resistance from the developer on many points, and we've already seen that. We've seen that with our open space levy proposal. We've seen it on other fronts. I'm not too concerned about the points of resistance. What I'm concerned about is, can we make a compelling case that is based on evidence that is likely to get over the line when it comes to the Minister and the VPA? There is no glory in glorious defeat, councillors, if what you put forward fails that test. And the community will hold you accountable if you cannot get the basics right. One of those basics is actually protecting the future of Preston Market, and this is the pathway to do it.
Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Amir, you have a right of reply.
I don't think there's a right of reply because there was an amendment to the
No, there was no amendment.
I had put 2 amendments to this particular motion.
But the motion has not been amended because the amendments failed. So there is...
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Councillor Amir.
I'm not sure I can top no glory in glorious defeat. I like that very much. I wanted to come back to the basics. We have talked in a few different directions tonight and come back to what this motion is that we've been discussing here. So the motion calls for the highest possible protections for the market. It outlines the vision from the community. It didn't come from any of us councillors. It came from the many rounds of consultation, talking to the advisory group, talking to people at the market themselves, talking to Darebin residents. And we do know that people come from far and wide, of all backgrounds, of all ages, and it's their voice that have created the points that we see here in this report. That's where those ideas and that vision came from. The motion here tonight and the reports don't form a view on the location of the market, and I won't talk further about that as Councillor McCarthy spoke very well. I will again acknowledge that the vision is ambitious and we may not be successful in achieving it. I also anticipate resistance from the developer, but we have to try to get the best possible outcome for the site. No one here wants gentrification. No one wants a shopping centre style. No one wants any of the traders to lose their job. We want the market that we love, but in a context that is financially sustainable, and that may not be the case in the current context. The market is 50 years old this year, and we want the market to be able to continue for another 50 years. And part of that is responding to the challenges that it's currently facing. We want the market to be able to be enjoyed not only of the current residents of Darebin and the people who do travel from far to come to the market, but Councillor Messina's grandson and future grandchildren, my daughter and her daughters, the new arrivals to Darebin over the next 5 decades and the years beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Amir. I'll now put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And against? We have in favour Councillor McCarthy, Councillor Lassurf, Councillor Newton, Councillor Amir and Councillor Rennie, and against Councillor Messina, Councillor Williams and Councillor Greco. Councillors, I'd like to suggest that we take a 5-minute break. We've been hard at it with debate. We will start again at 8:45, so that's actually 6 minutes.